Well, on a day when the Brexit talks are, we're told that, yes, what a surprise, another crunch point. Let's talk to the man who, well, partly responsible for getting us here, the leader of Reform UK, formerly the Brexit Party, Nigel Farage. Good morning to you.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Right, we are told that we are very close to a deal, and then we're told we're not close to a deal, that we could be leaving the EU transition period in just a matter of a few weeks without a deal whatsoever. What do you think the likelihood of a deal is? And if we don't get one, whose fault is it?
I think the likelihood of a deal, I'm afraid to say, is quite high, because I think what is clear is that Monsieur Barnier, and in particular President Macron, won't give us anything. Literally, they'll give us nothing. So Boris Johnson faces a choice. Does he simply walk away, or does he cave into their demands? The signs, Julia, are not good. We've already agreed that we will stay part of the European human rights regime. The Human Rights Act will stay. We will, of course, have the ECHR able to overrule our courts. But perhaps even more significantly, the government have also agreed that we'll stay part of the European arrest warrant. So, a Romanian magistrate with no prima facie evidence could have you, Julia Hartley-Brewer, extradited from this country and sent to Romania.
Don't give the Ramonas ideas, for God's sake.
Well, yeah, but of course, all of that overseen by the EU's own court. So when we used to hear taking back control of our laws, our money and our borders, clearly, in terms of laws, we're giving in already. Look, I hope I'm wrong. I hope Boris Johnson realises that if he caves to their demands, not only will he face a rebellion within the Conservative Party, he'll face a major electoral challenge from outside the Conservative Party. So I hope that he understands that, but I still think a sellout's on the way.
Okay, you think it's a sellout? I mean, there is a lot of talk that actually that the cabinet, we saw over the weekend, that the cabinet would stand firm behind a no deal. European research group of Eurosceptic MPs putting on a united front, something we hadn't seen for many years. Certainly when Theresa May was in charge, everyone was sort of arguing amongst themselves. So of course the EU thought they could get away with it. Is this an element, though? We're going to go down to the 11th hour and there will be a compromise agreement. And a lot of people who voted for Brexit, big supporters of you, will say, do you know what? Some sort of compromise is what's necessary. We've got the important stuff that really, really matters. A little compromise on, say, fishing rights or here and there isn't a big deal. But a lot of people also might say issues like governance and state aid are such big sticking points. There is no point voting for Brexit if we still allow the EU to decide what we can and can't do.
We shouldn't even be discussing a level playing field. It shouldn't even be a consideration, but it is. And why? Because Boris Johnson signed up to a new EU treaty last year, something that people at the time, I think because of Brexhaustion, chose to ignore. Look, if we finish up tied in any way to EU rules, then that is not Brexit. It's really quite simple, isn't it? And I'm afraid, 4.5 years, that's how long now Conservative prime ministers have had to sort this out. 4.5 years. It is wholly unsatisfactory. But as I say, despite all the tough words, my fear is that particularly given it looks like an incoming President Biden in America, who is not well disposed towards the United Kingdom, I think all of those pressures drive Boris into doing a deal Julia, you may be right. The country may say, do you know what? We can't be bothered. Let's just move on. But if there is just even a faintest feeling that Boris has broken his promises, we will be into very different politics in this country in a few weeks.
OK, well, you are rebranding your Brexit Party, which, of course, won the European elections in 2019, which is really what pushed the toppling of Theresa May, Boris Johnson into leading the Tory party and winning that 80 majority last December. I mean, goodness me, it feels like a lifetime ago, not just a year and a bit ago. But you're rebranding as the Reform UK Party. And your focus now is, well, depending on what happens with the Brexit deal and the trade talks, is actually focusing on what is going on in the UK right now, and that has been the lockdown. You're speaking to us right now from Kent, which of course is in Tier 3. Massive restrictions on people's lives in Tier 3, massive restrictions on most people's lives in this country. You're going to be standing candidates at the next local elections, because we don't have European elections anymore, on an anti-lockdown policy. Do you
Well,
think that there is going to be a strong demand, a strong support for your new party on that basis, if we're already, say, vaccinated half the country and we're already
this is
out of
not just
lockdown?
anti-lockdown. This is not just anti-lockdown. This is about, and when we campaigned in the brand new Brexit Party for the European elections, we did so under a motto of change politics for good. For us, Brexit is the first necessary step to wholesale reform and change into how this country is run and how this country is governed. And frankly, what we've seen through coronavirus is how badly run we are, how poorly our money is spent, how inefficient our quangos are. So we're a radical voice saying, let's bring our whole system of government into the 21st century, getting rid of the outdated House of Lords, amending the voting system, cleaning up postal voting, allowing people to hold referendums on issues which they choose, and without a doubt, properly taking on the BBC, taking on the big quangos, taking on Whitehall. That's what we're about.
Okay. And in terms of what support level you think you're going to have, I mean, there's a growing, I mean, certainly on the issue of lockdown and the issue of sort of us being basically, our lives now totally controlled by the state. Which many of us believe is now it's a total overreaction to the reality of the threat of COVID to the vast majority of the people. Where are you on the vaccine? The vaccine's going to be rolled out as of tomorrow. When you get your vaccine, you will have a little card saying you've had the vaccine. It's going to be recorded, nationally that you have had the vaccine. Would you take the vaccine yourself? Although I know you and I aren't actually in the first few categories, despite our advancing years. But B, would you? Do you think that there will be some sort of vaccine passport? And where were you on that?
Look, I want this thing to be over as quickly as possible. I agree with you. I think the government has taken outrageous levels of power over our lives. I mean, gosh, they're going to give us 4 days over Christmas when we can meet up with 2 other households. Isn't that nice of them? I mean, as if they own Christmas. They've even banned booze in pubs in Wales. I mean, the whole thing's awful. On the vaccine, look, I welcome anything that helps us get back to life as quickly as possible. But let's be honest about it. It links in with government power. I'm going to have no choice about whether I take the vaccine. Literally no choice at all. Because if I want to fly anywhere else in the world, they're going to insist that I have had it. And I think you'll find, Julia, that it may be very difficult for you to go into that building and work unless you've had the vaccine. That is how it's going to be done. And do I think it should be compulsory? Absolutely not. Do I welcome it as a way of perhaps getting back to some normality? Yes, I do. But I'm sorry. People out there that think they can avoid taking this vaccine, well, if you're retired or living in rural England somewhere, you probably can get away without having it. The rest of us will be forced into it.
Okay, even though, and I would certainly want my parents to get it in their 70s, whether I, as someone who's healthy in her early 50s, who's had the virus, whether it is sensible for me to take it. I certainly would not want my child to take it. It's not been tested on pregnant women. We don't know what fertility issues there are. I don't think it's an unsafe vaccine, but it's not been tested for the safety on that measure. I would certainly not in the month of Sundays will my child be taking the vaccine. I can tell you that. I mean, I'm not bothered about taking it, but I wouldn't let my child take it.
No, look, I fully understand that. But the point I'm making is that the corporate world and the travel world is effectively going to insist, Julia, you will be taking this vaccine whether you want to or not.
That's the end of the matter. Okay, let me ask you about one other story that's been in the news, and this is a Black Lives Matter taking the knee, ongoing demonstrations of support for that issue from football players in the Premier League. First time we saw fans let in, Millwall fans booing that, not being booed by other fans, we understand, at other stadiums, despite some reports of that. Big outcry about the fans being racist, booing black players taking the knee, we're told. Were the players right or wrong? Were the fans right or wrong?
There still seems to be, in elements of our sporting world, an extreme naivety as to who the Black Lives Matter movement are. And let's just be clear about that. This is not about, they weren't booing a campaign for fairness. They weren't booing a campaign for racial equality. They were booing a Marxist mob who deface statues, try and set fire to the Union flag on the cenotaph, are now actually forming up as a political party, would you believe, because they have an application in with the Electoral Commission. And Black Lives Matter, the movement itself, is Marxist, It is yobbish. It is violent. It is truly and utterly appalling. And I think the Football Association are getting this completely wrong.
Well, they say that, look, this isn't about the Black Lives Matter, the movement. This is about the sentiment.
No. That's the point. This is where the naivety is. They're still backing the Black Lives Matter movement, as are various other players. And I think, frankly, if we're going to have a campaign around fairness and equality, we've got to get away from those three letters, BLM, because they now mean something else. Increasingly, people in the country have sussed out what the Black Lives Matter movement is. For some reason, the football authorities haven't yet got there.
Okay, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Nigel Farage, a leader of the Brexit Party that's being reformed as the Reform UK Party. Thank you very much for that.